Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now please join me in a moment of silence. There's some terrible things that are going on in the world. We usually have a moment of silence with regard to our servicemen, but today the events in Japan bring us closer to the idea that natural disasters can be greater than anything that man inflicts on each other. Thank you very much. The first item on the agenda is public comment. And I'd like to mention as we start public comment that those of you who might have been anticipating that we would discuss the wind regulations, we have received them, and we will be taking them under advisement, and we will be discussing those we will have a whole discussion and debate on that on the 23rd of March. Okay, public comment? Do you want public comment? No, you're scheduled. Okay. Is there any other public comment?
Can't hear you.
Is there public comment?
Is there public comment? Okay.
There is.
Yes, hi. Lily Green, Wildplate. I would ask you to reconsider and discuss the regulations, the wind sighting regulations today.
We're not prepared to do that.
Thank you.
And they're actually not on the agenda, so we need to schedule them as an agenda item.
Any other public comment? Okay, I believe then we could, let's have a couple of minutes early. Do you have any public comment to offer before we start?
No. Do I?
Yeah.
No.
Pat?
No.
Okay. I guess we could start with
You can, we're on time.
Business Roundtable.
I'm Elliot Carr, co-chairman of the Business Roundtable. There are 5 other members of the executive committee here, and a couple more that may come. I should apologize for Maggie Geist, who's not here. She, as some of you may know, has 2 very ill parents, and
Please
confined to
convey our sympathy.
We've given you copies of a statement. I wasn't planning to add too much to it. I've got 20 copies here if anybody else wants one. It makes a number of comments on county government and ends up with a recommendation that you appoint a special committee to review the whole of county government. Briefly, we think in some ways the way the county is operating, there are 2 legislative bodies, you and the Assembly, and not a strong central administration in a time where diminishing resources and everything else require a consolidation of services with the towns. I'll just say 5 things very quickly. All of the towns have very distinctive character. We think they're going to be here. We admire them. But by the same token, I think one would have to admit that if somebody were coming into the area now to establish government, they would not appoint 15 different groups to be doing a lot of things in 15 service units, and if they did, the boundary lines would differ in many respects for watersheds and the like, and we think in times of severe financial constraints, there needs to be an acceleration of efforts to consolidate services. We think there will always be 15 towns, and we see the role of the county as creating a stronger umbrella so that towns can get together and pool things. That's all I have to say. Again, I've got copies of this statement. Various members here are prepared to talk at greater length in any subject we'd like to.
Thank you. Sheila?
Well, I'm just, in reading their recommendation, they would like to have the creation of a special commission. And you're suggesting that Senators Henri Rauschenbach and Rob O'Leary be the chair of those. And I think those are very good choices and prestigious people who know what they're talking about when it comes to legislation, the legislative process, and the county and how the state and the county work together. I don't have a problem with anybody looking at the county charter and seeing how we can improve going forward.
Pat?
Well, I guess my first question would be, does everybody here in the room have a copy of this? Of what you do not?
Your copies.
You said you had copies.
Okay. I think it would be helpful if you had a copy so you know what we're talking about.
Single page.
Yeah, both sides of one page.
Right. As you know, the Business Roundtable has had this, has been discussing this for some time. And I think some of us have had an opportunity to even attend a BRT meeting and be able to talk with them about this. Currently, as you know, the commissioners are looking internally at the way county services are functioning in the county as of now, because we're looking at what we do now in terms of services, in terms of their impact on the Cape Towns, on the whole community, how many are served by them, what the costs of those programs are, and how relevant they are in today's time. Are they programs that we want to continue because they're important and they're valued by the towns on the Cape? And therefore, should they be expanded? Would that be important? We have a consultant working with us now to be able to make those, to be able to provide us with that information. And then going forward, what do we want to do? Are there services that we really don't need anymore? And are there other programs that we might want to add? So that internal evaluation or assessment is concurrent. This, of course, is much bigger than that. This is really looking at the complete and total role of county government on Cape Cod. And I think it couldn't come at a better time. I think it's always important to take a look. Every organization needs to take periodic looks at where it is and what it's going to do going forward. So I think, and based on the meeting that we had in Harwich a few Saturdays ago, first of all, I was amazed at the number of people who attended. I thought that was really incredible. And it showed that people are interested in county government. They want to know more about it. And they also want it to mean something to them. They want to understand it. And they want to know how county government interacts with their own communities. And if it's a positive interaction, or if it isn't, how can it be? So I think that demonstrated to all of us that there is a desire out there on the part of the Cape Towns to do something about this. And I thought it was great that both Henri Rauschenbach and Rob O'Leary seemed to indicate that they would be willing to do this because they have long-standing commitments to the Cape and have both functioned in the legislature and the Senate as well. So I support this, and I would like to see us move forward with this commission. What do we call it? A special commission to look at county government. I think it would be very useful, and I think also the BRT has outlined the really important issues that face us here: the transportation, housing, wastewater, economic development, and environmental protection. I mean, those are really the big issues. And anything that this commission would do, should do, with keeping those strategic initiatives in mind and issues in mind.
May I do a follow-up on that?
Yeah.
You know, I do think that we're at a crossroads. The county is about 22, 23 years old. And I do think that those who were responsible for its reconstitution basically did state it in the beginning that there are going to be issues that the towns are not going to be able to handle. And I think that we are now at that time of how are we going to look at our energy needs, our economic development needs, and our environmental needs going forward. And these are very large ticket items for the towns to handle. We have wastewater issues that are huge, and the onus is put on the towns, and it's helping them crumble. And I think the trick here is to be able to structure the government so that it does handle those large issues that are those umbrella issues without taking the control from the towns. The towns are part of the Cape, they're part of New England. They certainly have their responsibilities and their distinctive charm, and I don't think that this is a proposal to do away with any of that. I think it's actually a proposal to save that. And each town on its own, no matter how hard they tried, I sat at Wellfleet's hearing on the warrant on what was going to be put on, and the issues that are facing the towns are huge. And when they're looking at even at their energy needs, there was a debate on going with the CVEC or not. How can they have the technical expertise to handle these issues? How can they afford the technical expertise to handle their wastewater issues? So these are areas where a county government is definitely needed. And is the structure that we have now that it's been in place 20 years, really prepared to handle those issues going forward? I know that there's talk of evaluating both the executive branch and the legislative branch. That might mean some interesting things for all of us who serve on either of those boards. But if it's all for the better, I think it's our responsibility to take a good look and see if we can do a better job for the people of Cape Cod and have this to be a more effective, relevant government. I know that a few weeks ago I had sent out an email, and I talked about this group being a esteemed and educated group, and I meant that in that you have educated yourselves to the county government. I mean, I know that a year ago you were before the charter review with recommendations, and that you have visited counties, you have looked at county structures in other areas, and that was my my reference to that. So I agree with Pat. I think this is a perfect time for this.
I wanted to just say one other thing, and that this is sort of a grassroots initiative. This is not a group of elected officials who have decided it's time to change government. This is really a citizens' initiative at the grassroots, and the Business Roundtable represents the grassroots. So I think this to me has great value in terms of moving forward with it and agreeing that this is a good thing to do, is because of how this came about.
Well, now that you've heard from the two commissioners with regard to this, I think they seem to be, excuse me, now that you've heard from both commissioners with regard to this, and they seem to be in general support of it, I think that this might be an opportunity to hear from members of the public that might be here that might want to add some comments with regard to what they've heard. Yes, Larry.
Yeah, I'm Larry Cole. I'm a member of the BRT Executive Committee and a former selectman in Harwich, and I want to pick up on a couple of things that Sheila and Mary Pat mentioned. I think the study that you have ongoing internally with a consultant is useful. 3 years ago, the Boston Fed held a conference on state and local government relations in New England, and they brought in some experts from outside who studies that kind of thing. And one of the things I'd like to suggest is that there are also people who study relations between local and county governments. And as you know, we had some work done by the Ridleys looking at some representative coastal counties in other parts of the U.S. where they typically don't have the New England model of where they have unincorporated territory outside of municipalities where counties provide local services. But the point was, one of the points was that there are counties with very large service delivery responsibilities and big budgets, and they don't have anywhere near as large a structure as we do in order to carry those out. There's also literature on the effectiveness. And there's also literature, and my point is, I hope the task force, besides contemplating our history and thinking internally and introspectively about how we might do things better, would look at, try to find examples elsewhere of things that have worked. There are things that can be centralized and concentrated and from which you can derive economies of scale better, things be delivered more efficiently than having them in all the same, everything done by all 15 towns. But it's, you have to look carefully. For example, we've had some examples of police departments thinking about merging. Well, it's not just that simple. It turns out that the local patrolling is best done by a local entity, but things like gun registration and detective work and accident reconstruction can be done centrally. So things like that need to be identified. And in relation to that, whatever comes out of the task force in terms of recommendations, it's going to be criticized as the county trying to take power away from the towns, okay? And I think one of the ways that you can deflect some of that is to indicate under the umbrella concept that the term that is used in the document is that the county government stands ready to foster regional cooperation, whether it's county-wide or sub-regions, and not by the counties necessarily. And it could be you could have a council of police chiefs that get together to see how better to deliver police services with the county just providing some kind of support. And Bill, you will recall 3 years ago or so, you and your two colleagues at that point, when you came to Harwich and gave your annual review of what the county had done for us lately, when we got into the topic of regionalization, you asked for suggestions from the towns. That was not particularly well received. I think out of the task force and the study, you've got to make specific proposals with some evidence to back up why you're making them, instead of just asking for what can we do, what would the towns like to have us do for you. And a further point is, I think one of the things that could, and then I'll shut up, then one of the things that could come out of it is the result could be a hybrid. The retention of a functioning county with some COG, okay, council, where services are provided at the county level if the towns want them at the stated prices. You could have a hybrid. It's not either or.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, there's one thing I'd like to point out.
Excuse me, there is Mary Lou.
Oh, Mary Lou.
Yes, Mary Pettit. One thing I want to comment before I say what I have to say is that I hope in the future you might think about mics for the public. If you want public involvement, you always have to make sure that the public can hear you. And I think it's a failure both at the local and the county and the state level not to take that into consideration, so I'd recommend that. I have been a member, or was a member, of the Assembly of Delegates for 14 years, and during that period I was much supportive of regional efforts. And I had said when I was elected, and I represented Eastham, which has one of the lowest percentage of voters, that I really wasn't elected as an Eastham member. I was elected #1 for county and regional support services. That was my job. Secondly, I was Eastham's representative. And my task then was to make sure that of the regional efforts the county was involved in and the work that the county did, my town benefited from those. But my town wasn't my #1 consideration, the county was. I still believe that. Now, I wasn't always well received at the assembly level by my town. In fact, when we had a surplus, and those were the good old days when there was a county surplus, as Julia Taylor said, it was much more fun to be a member of county government then. I always recommended that the money that we had in surplus should go to regional programs that benefited all of the towns of the Cape. That wasn't the way we did it. We gave it to each individual town. I think some of that wasn't spent that effectively. I would trust and hope that the money that was regionally allocated was. But the mindset of government at the county level is more that it's your town than it is your county. And I think that the recommendations that have been made here by the Business Roundtable are very challenging and very interesting and non-threatening. As you know, the League of Women Voters did hold a meeting in January and has been a partner in county government work and observing for years. Many, and I'm speaking now as an individual, not as a league member, I think there are several recommendations here that could be actively supported by many people. And one is the setting up of the task force. And I'm appreciative of the fact that it is people who know the county but have no axe to grind that would be in the leadership roles. And that would be Henri Rauschenbach and Rob O'Leary. I think that they're respected individuals. I don't see that they would benefit or one way or the other. I think they both have good records in research and in looking and in government. Both of them love government. And that's hard to find today. And they are both good at it. And I worked with both of them over the years. And Henri probably was the most creative individual I've ever met as far as government was concerned here in Barnstable County. So I think the setting up of that task force is key. And I think that those suggestions are absolutely excellent. Also, the Regional Initiative Advisory Committee is, I think, important. The League has long supported, and I'm not speaking again for the League, but they've long supported a role for a regional coordinator or some sort of county-wide regional effort that is not now present in order to make government more effective. I think that this could be really presented to the towns as enhancing the role of the towns, not eliminating or decreasing the role of the towns. And I'm not saying that with tongue-in-cheek. I think that this whole effort could enable the towns, whatever results you get at the end, to do some of the work that they only can do much better, because they're having to spend so much of their time on issues that they have to do regionally, and that is taking away from their identity, in a sense, because they can't concentrate more on local issues because of that. I think this effort could be presented to them in a very clear way as really enhancing what they do. I would also urge people not to prejudge the results of this. If you're going to give a task force the rights to do this and to study and evaluate and chart a future, don't say, well, you might do it this way, or this might come out of it. Let them make those recommendations. You have to make sure that you had a task force that was representative of the county, that probably included some academic background of people who had experience in other counties. And then also make sure that it challenges that task force to look at technological challenges that are facing us today. I think that's key, and I don't think we're prepared to do that at this point. It's going to need coordination among the departments. It's going to need coordination among the municipalities. We don't have somebody saying, this is going to change perhaps the way government functions in the future. Are we ahead of that challenge, or are we going to face it afterwards? There is much research and data out there now that could be utilized, and this task force could look at that. I'm not meaning to prejudge. I just urged you not to do that, and it sounds like I'm doing it. But I think the whole technological challenge that's facing everybody today, not just government, needs to be a part of that mandate. So as a citizen and as someone who's looked over this initial statement, I'm impressed with it. I'm impressed with the non-threatening nature of it. And on two areas, I would find myself in complete agreement with what it states. I think the challenge is to make sure that the task force is charged correctly and has given freedom to be creative and to make us into the kind of county that we can be for the future. Thank you.
As always, your remarks are very insightful and
very gratefully received. Thank you.
I just, Sheila Bowen from Harwich, just a normal citizen.
We've known you for years. How are you?
I'm just fine, Bill, thank you. I just have one question, and it's kind of a selfish one. From your conception of this special commission, will there also be a time for public input? I mean, where there will be a hearing of sorts where people can raise questions about the direction of the county government and what they would like to see?
I think so.
I would, I'm jumping in, but I would venture to say that any recommendations, I mean, I believe that any task force that completes its mission and then has recommendations, then has to have, their obligation is to go before the public.
Right, I understand.
And state their recommendations, take that feedback, and even before they submit it totally, there might be very good suggestions or ideas to that, such as when we all went through the RPP and that sort of thing. There was a lot of changes before that was an official document going forward because of input from public. So I would venture to say that would have to be a mandatory.
Regional forums,
mandatory.
where you ask people.
I would think this is a commission. I mean, if this is what we actually call it, but this is a public entity. Right. And I would think that all of their meetings would be held in open session. Right. And if there were any reason for anything to be held in an executive session, I think it would have to meet the prescriptions of the open meeting law. So I would think that this is not a group that would function outside of the public.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
That it would be my, I would feel very strongly about that, because this is a citizen's, citizens are asking for this, and there's no secrets here. And I agree with Mary Lou that there is no predetermined outcome. I think the outcome comes as a result of the process. The process will end up with outcomes that people who want to attend can be there and have input in.
Right. And there'll be public notice of all meetings.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. I cannot see that this would not be held in open session.
Well, I, for one, would be 100% behind that.
The other thing I wanted to say about what Mary Lou said, a couple of things, and I really agree with what you said. There is no predetermined outcome, at least there isn't on my part. I think that this has to be a result of citizen participation, because that's the best way, and those are the best outcomes. And also the technological challenges, and also the piece about the working toward regional solutions to local government. I was at a meeting this morning on solid waste in the town where I live. You all know I live in Falmouth. And Falmouth has tended to be very independent and not so much working toward regional solutions at all. But I was very happy this morning to see, when we talk about solid waste, to realize that the only way we're really going to be able to solve this solid waste issue is through regional efforts. And that was kind of at the top of the list. And we know, there was someone there from Mashpee as well, we know there's a lot of data out there on the web that can be very valuable as we look toward regionalizing particular services. But to have this commission be able to perhaps create through the structure of government a way in which those aspects of regionalization and all that information that's out there can be made available to towns. Towns struggle now just to do the job they have to do, which is take care of their own citizens. And to have the time and the resources to be able to look beyond that is extremely difficult now in these times. So this is a real function of county government, to be able to, not to do the work necessarily, not to be the government that provides the regional service, but actually finds a way to make those regional services possible and available. And I think that's pretty much how this might work.
Jim. Or Jerry.
Jerry has her hand.
Oh, Jerry.
Yeah. Sherry Rappaport from the League of Women Voters. And, we haven't seen this, so I can't make an official comment other than to say that regionalization and the structure of the county have been of great concern to us, and so we are appreciative of the task force recommendations to look at this. I'd like to add one thing, and that's a suggestion from Julia Taylor made at the delegate assembly, that we look at what the problem is we want to fix. We said we want to evaluate it, but I think we need to take time to see what the problem is we want to fix before we get too far ahead, because that will help guide the work of the commission. Thank you.
You know, in looking at the list on our the sheet that was handed out, transportation, housing, wastewater, economic development, environmental protection, I mean, it's easy to see they self-define as regional things because they're all interrelated. I mean, if you talk about housing, which of course is the thing I talk about, well, it's certainly the placement of housing, which we haven't always done very well in the past, is related to transportation. Housing is certainly related to wastewater. Housing is related to economic development. Housing is related to environmental protection. And so all those things are...
Steve, would you close that door?
All of those things are integrated, which is why they're all regional problems and don't necessarily need to be implemented on a regional basis, but they need to be planned, expedited, and coordinated on a regional basis. The last one I would mention that isn't on here, and I think it's not on here for a fairly good reason, is public safety, because we see public safety in the past and the present as being police and fire. But of course, as we've all learned since 9/11 and in the last few days, public safety is a much larger issue, and in a world that's changing as quickly as ours is, I think there needs to be an overarching concern over public safety issues. And it could be something simple like water quality, it relates to this, air quality, which we have sometimes had a problem with, but potentially it could be a lot worse. I mean, there needs to be an overarching look at this, and the county has, even now, you know, some capacity to do these kinds of things where the towns have relatively little and sometimes none. And so I think it's not just a matter of a government efficiency, it's government being able to change, to do some of the things that need to be done with changes in the way we live, changes in our technology, changes in economic development patterns and those kinds of things. And you know, I think this is a turning point, as you've said, but I just wanted to elaborate on that a tiny bit.
Bob? Bob Murray from, what are you doing there?
I don't know. I'm Bob Murray from the Falmouth Housing Corporation. That's one place. Still connected with Hetch and Howard, but I wanted to talk about, because one question that kept coming up at the BRT subcommittee meetings, executive committee meetings, was, how are you going to pay for this? And I kept telling them, the bigger question is, how are the cities and towns going to survive in 10 years if you don't do it? That's a much larger question. And you know, I'll take a really microcosm of regionalization and what it's done for poor people on Cape Cod. The two largest pantries on the Cape happen to be in Howard and Falmouth. And they got together and they helped form this hunger network several years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. And within that, they got together and they got some grants and they bought 3 huge freezers. Now the 2 large pantries already had freezers. They didn't need these freezers, but the smaller pantries did. And so they put the freezers strategically located, one in Falmouth, one in Howard, and one in the Mid-Cape area. And it allows them to buy enough frozen foods at a decent price from the food bank that the smaller pantries can take care of that. Now that's an example of collaboration and regionalization, if you will. Very small example. Nobody forced it on them. It just got done. And it's worked out very, very well. Now you take the other thing about regionalization, housing is on the list, and the state is pushing that they are saying now, if you want to do a tax credit unit, which is a tech project, a low-income housing tax credit project, which is about the only game in town for housing development these days, you got to do 50 units or more. You talk about putting 50 units, you know, from even Howard down, and people say, you're crazy, where are you going to place 50 units? So then you have to take that size of the development and break it up into a couple of locations, and you do a 50-unit project in 2 sites. But you have to have the planning and the wastewater and all the other things to go with it. But I think it forces you to develop housing better. Because now you're going to be looking for sites. Is it on storage? Is it failing near transportation? Can you get the things on the site that you need to get onto the site? So those are just two examples of things that I think I've done better with regionalization. And the other thing we haven't mentioned here today, we're not necessarily talking that everything has to be done on a 15-town region. There's lots of sub-regions that can come out of this, or 3 or 4 towns getting together and doing things. But I thought about the long process that Howard and Chatham went through recently at the school, and said, how much easier would that process have been if they had been an umbrella agency that had a lot of experience with school regionalization and school consolidation? So those are kind of the benefits that I think that come from this. I really think we can't afford to wait much longer, and I think we can't afford not to do it.
Is there anybody else? Yes.
Phyllis Day from Falmouth. My question is, are you anticipating that this commission will take on the role as the charter review that's called for under the current charter? Will this be independent? Is the final culmination of this going to go back to the voters?
I'd like to respond to that, because one of the pieces that's been left out of this request is that the Assembly of Delegates does have the responsibility for the review of the charter, and I think that, that we all understand that. I believe that the Business Roundtable has approached us on the basis of being an agency that might initiate this process, but I certainly would feel that because the responsibility for charter review resides with the Assembly, that their participation, needs to be, included. So, I think we all understand that part of it. But this is a forum that I think is a little bit more conducive to a discussion than, or let's say the initiation of a discussion rather than the completion of one.
Well, along those lines then, if the culmination of this is going to be the product of this commission going before the voters, then that's the main thrust to what the commission should be doing. I mean, it's nice to get business people and it's nice to get other representatives to sit down and talk and rehash this as a government process, an educational process, but it's a political process as well, and you can't leave the politics of this out. I mean, we all talk about the 15 towns, we talk about the boundaries, but if the bottom line is going to be that this document is going to end up going before the voters, then I think that needs to be in the forefront of their discussions, because what somebody might want to do as a discussion and what somebody might want to vote on sometime down the line, they may not jive. And rather than having a redo, or then having to fine-tune the document to make it politically acceptable, I think all of that needs to be laid out in the beginning so that there's only one process, and also to make sure that the Assembly is not going to be usurped in their position or their duties or anything that they might have already started. And having been county clerk for 14 years, I'm 12 years, I'm sensitive to the differences between the legislative and the executive. So that's all I would ask, is that this is all ironed out before anything really starts, and so that nobody's spinning their wheels going nowhere.
Thank you, Phyllis. Certainly, in discussing it, we had always thought that any major changes, and we certainly would hope for major changes, would have to go before the voters.
Not only that, the changes in the structure of the government have to go to the legislature.
Yes.
That would be the state legislature.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, if it was approved by, and if I'm correct, that has not yet ever really been done, has it? I mean, have we had the legislature
The initial charter went to the legislature and was approved. The Cape Cod Commission Act, that was all approved. So, so those pieces have. Since that time, the only change we made that required legislative approval, and that was in the '99 charter review, was the transfer of the sheriff to the state. That, of course, was filed but never was passed, but ended up being initiated and legislated 2 years ago.
Right, we got that.
that was certainly one of, but not the only reason for recommending Henri Rauschenbach and Rob O'Leary. They both were involved in some of these other trips through the state, both at the county and the state legislature.
Successful ones.
Yes.
Now, at this point, I see members of the assembly here. We haven't heard from Tony Scalise.
Hi, Tony Scalise from Brewster. In all the discussions that I'm listening to right at the moment, the first time that I've heard the Cape Cod Commission mentioned was just now when Mark mentioned it. In reevaluating the commissioners and the Assembly of Delegates, will there also be some kind of reevaluation or at least investigation into the policies of the Cape Cod Commission?
That is part of county government, is it not?
I think that many
So
of
in
these-
this special commission,
If I could respond to that in this way, many of the questions that were raised, especially in the area of housing and economic development, are under committees that are not standing committees, but staff over at the Cape Cod Commission. So since that's part of the implementing and planning agency, I would suspect that they would have to be engaged and involved in any evaluation of county governance, remembering that Barnstable County has governance and not governing authority. That's the distinction, because if we had governing authority, the discussion would take a different tone to it. But in order to get many of the things you talked about, we do have to get legislative and community support through a referendum. But the more important question to me is, I had hoped that Ron Bergstrom was going to be here today because I'd spoken to him earlier and I thought he was on his way over here, is that we also have to find some avenue by which we can engage the Assembly as, let's say, as part of this process, because certainly the executive branches and the legislative branch have differences in approach, and I believe that although your document makes quite clear that self-evaluation, does have some issues with regard to whether or not you're getting what I would call a complete objective view as an outcome, I think that in order to facilitate the process of looking, you do have to have some input and some participation at what I would call almost on a consultant basis, so that you're not missing what the activities have been in either one of these branches up till now. But in any case, are there any more? Did you have more?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, it does state here that their recommendation, of membership of this commission would be at least a county, a member from the Assembly, a member from the commissioners, a selectman, several representatives of the general public. They're not saying that they're going to necessarily run the whole show. They want input from other people. So I do think that everybody's interests would be provided. And having sat on the Charter Review Committee last year, that is deemed by the Assembly really has never had enough time to look at time or resources. What we were lacking was an attorney at our beck and call to answer different questions. And I do recommend that that resource be given. And if the Business Roundtable is asking for us to appoint a special commissioner, special commission, I think that we should, if we are going to go forward, set those parameters of what the public's input would be at certain times. I do think that there'll be open meetings, but open meetings with public attending, every single meeting can clog the work of that group. Whereas when you now have public hearings, once you have a document, a proposed document, and then you bring that around for more input, and then you can make those recommended changes that have merit, and then put it forward. Then you can do another set of public hearings if this is the final document. I think that that's the structure that we would want to be, that we would want to dictate and suggest.
I somewhat disagree on that. I don't think any of the meetings should ever be held in private. I think
No, I'm not saying it in private. I'm just saying.
No, but even the public is, any time you have a meeting, the public can be there. And I think we should encourage that.
Yes.
Actually, encourage the public to be there. We want their participation. Phyllis has raised an interesting point here, because if this is called a special commission to evaluate county government, under the charter, the Assembly of Delegates is responsible for doing a 5-year review of the charter. So they're a little bit different, but they're the same. I mean, it's not quite the same. It is really different. And I think our first task going forward, if we vote to go forward with this, would be to sit down with the co-chairs, Henri and Rob O'Leary, and have a discussion with them about the difference between what this special commission will be doing and how that may or may not be different from a charter review as required under the current charter. And I think that has to be clear. I think it has to be clear to everybody. It needs to be clear to us, to the Assembly certainly, and to the public as well, so that we know that it's not usurping anything that's currently in the charter, but also it's establishing a level of cooperation among all bodies of government, that we all agree that we need to do this, and this is how we want to move forward, and everybody has a role to play. So no one is really being excluded. So I think that conversation would have to occur at the very beginning.
And in that conversation, if I hear you correctly, you are intending to involve some member or members of the Assembly of Delegates as part of this conversation with Rauschenbach and O'Leary?
Well, any meeting we have is open to the public, so yes, anybody who wanted to come would be here, and we would encourage people to come while we have the discussion.
Well, I guess I'm looking for more of a specific invitation to them to participate in that setting the guideline. Just from the point of view let's say, if we are engaging and involving them, and there is that overlap between an understanding of charter review versus the organization of government, it just seems that it would be useful if we had their participation as part of the formation, and then from that point, I think that we wouldn't have to go and tell them. We would have their some type of let's say support from the beginning.
Well, I think our first objective is always transparency,
yes.
And if we start with that basic principle, then I think everything else will pretty much flow for how our meetings are structured, what the agendas are, who's being notified, who's being encouraged to participate. If we start with the basic premise of transparency, I think will serve us very well.
You certainly have. I have to agree with that. Yes,
I also think that this is, if I'm wrong, please tell me, but I have the sense that you're requesting to have a special commission, independent of county government. You want members of the county government there, but it's not necessarily, this is a citizens' initiative. And if it is to be independent and transparent without anybody's stake in the game, because what you are proposing is looking at the structure of government, and do we have the right structure for us to go forward? And I think the question has to do with, are we too tied to the boundaries of our towns to be able to embrace a regional vision? And I think that there's a certain amount of independence that we have to give this commission if it is going to be able to do the job that it's looking at. It's not looking at the charter review. It's not looking at what exists already. It's independent, looking from the outside in. And if everybody's hands from the government, and this was the complaint of the charter review the last time, because it was outweighed by county members, both assembly and commissioners, than it was with members of the public. So if this is to be an independent view, I think that we have to establish it as an independent view, tell the parameters that we would like to see, the guidelines that they would have to follow is open meeting law, transparency, public input, but it's going to be their special commission.
I think we have a model that I think would be successful, and that is the Economic Development Commission, where there are members of county government that are placed on that organization.
You mean the council?
No, Economic Council. The Cape Cod Development Council. The members of county government are participants. The chair of economic affairs from the assembly, a member of the county commissioners, and a member of the Cape Cod Commission, but they don't vote. They do not have a vote. They are there in a consultancy basis, and I think that that would be the kind of model that you're suggesting.
I hate to talk to people who are behind me. I'm Alan McClellan from Orleans. And
Yes, that's
I'd like to expand on what Sheila has said, but by way of background, I've had the luxury of working in what we call one city council in the county in Massachusetts, Suffolk, and then the most populous, Middlesex, and then the most unique, which is Barnstable. And I think Sheila's raised a very important point. When you have a charter review, you automatically are confined to what's between the front cover and the back cover of the charter. And you're looking at it, and you're looking for commas and colons and misspellings and things that might have been forgotten. And I watched that go through the charter review several times in Orleans, where I live. What we're really talking about here is blue sky. Let's take a step back, get people who are not involved directly in the charter review, but looking conceptually at what a county form of government can do here in Massachusetts in 2011 and 2012, not what was anticipated in 23 years ago. I mean, a lot has changed in 23 years, and it's changing very rapidly. And I'll give you a couple of fantastic examples. I've been involved in open space acquisition. And in the last 2 years, we have had situations where the town of Brewster and the town of Dennis got together to protect their water supply. The town of Harwich and the town of Chatham got the largest state grant ever for water protection because they worked together. And I was involved working with Elliott and Brewster in Orleans, protecting the Orleans watershed in the town of Brewster. And I'll never forget standing up in front of the Finance Committee and say, well, we don't want to buy any open space in Brewster because we can't use it. But that's where our water supply happens to be. You know, 200 years ago, somebody put a line down between Orleans and Brewster, not thinking about public water supply. So there are things that are happening here that are absolutely critical, and people are responding to new issues of government. And I think that this commission will have a unique opportunity to help us all out.
Marsha, you have a question?
Very well said.
Yeah,
Thank you. Scott.
I do have a question now because you've kind of gone around a bit of a, Marsha King, Mashpee, a bit of a circle here. You've said that you want to bring it to the voters. If you now appoint a commission outside, that has no jurisdiction. So, and I don't disagree with that, but I mean, I'm saying is that if you're now talking about a committee that looking at the whole county as itself, that's not part of the 5-year charter review. So what vehicle are you using, since you said, and this document says you want to bring it to the voters, they have no authority to bring it to the voters, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah,
and I'd like to respond to that.
I guess I'm just concerned, you're now talking kind of two different things here.
Well, not exactly, because I would suggest to you that when we have had independent commissions convene before, for example, when we convened a task force to look at the Cape Cod Commission separately, they made recommendations which in turn were presented to the county commissioners, who in turn, by their acceptance and were able to create an ordinance that essentially was effective in moving it forward. So like all independent commissions that are formed to examine things, the recommendations that come forward as the advice that they give is put before people with the responsibility, in this case, the county commissioners, to see whether or not it is something that should be put before all of the voters to move forward. But if the intention in the beginning is that they prepare something that would be in a format that should be presented, I think that that's an important distinction to be made at the beginning, so that when they frame a recommendation, it would be in the format that could be transferred for that purpose. Spiro.
Spiro Mitropassis from Yarmouth, Assembly Delegate. This effort sounds very reminiscent of the 21st Century Task Force, the one that you're referring to now. 5 of whose members are in the room here, so we're all familiar with what transpired in the review of the Cape Cod Commission. I would assume that if this process were to go forward, if this committee were to be put together, that would serve as a model. And if I remember correctly, there weren't any members of the Cape Cod Commission on it, although there was a couple of commissioners. There weren't any assembly delegates and there weren't any county commissioners. I'm not sure that we would need to include the elected officials in this review panel. But to affect the change that we recommended in that task force, you were able to do so administratively. If anything substantive were to come out of that task force, we could have pursued it legislatively as well, but we were able to accomplish what we needed to without going that route. And I would think something similar would happen here if the recommendations could be handled administratively. It may involve a county ordinance, but not much more. If it would be somewhat more substantial, the next logical step would be to convene the Charter Review Committee and spend the year looking at those recommendations, formulating the legislative changes, and then take it to the voters as the next step. And if I'm not mistaken, even after the voters voted it, you'd still need to go to the state legislature to affect any charter changes. So that served as a good model. I'll let Mr. Carr speak as the chairman of that group to explain the experience.
Yeah, I've been trying to avoid this a lot, and I apologize for not turning around the first time. Well, the second. There were two Cape Cod Commission task forces, one about 20 years ago and one 5 or 6, and I chaired them both. So obviously I do not see myself in a role in this one. I should disassociate myself with that. But there is a lot of history there. Certainly neither of them ever had a meeting that the public wasn't welcome to. They were in this room, one of them, and they drew a bigger crowd. The commission draws a bigger crowd than the county as a whole.
Thank goodness.
Does. And I think both times, and this is why I get up right now, we were assuming that it had to go to the legislature and then to the voters. So I think that is the probable order. Why exactly? Certainly at both of them, there was the concept of changing legislation. Both of them, they didn't want to go there. They didn't want to take the commission to the legislature, so to speak. In the end, I don't see this one doing the job without legislation and the voters. And yes, I've been sitting up here thinking, yes, there was no one on either one from the commission, although there wasn't a minute of meeting where the commission wasn't sitting in the room. So as you recall, Spiro, and there's no right or wrong in a lot of this, and why therefore, it certainly never went through my mind when we were coming up with this list to put somebody on from all these others, that we never had them on those two that I couldn't get out of my mind. But I would say this is more complex, and I personally would put the organization in the room. I think all the major players should be in the room, but they could be there without being on it. But the big thing is there are two models. Bill, you were sitting here for one, and Rob O'Leary was involved in the second one, even though he was the state senator then. And that was the, he wasn't on it, but
and Audrey was an appointee to the second one.
Yeah, that's right. Audrey was on the second one.
Yeah, and Rob O'Leary was recruited to help recruit the members of the and suggest members of that committee.
Yeah, I can remember sitting in a room where we were talking about the members.
Yeah. Okay, and I thought that, personally, I thought the outcome of that was successful.
I'm obviously biased, but I think almost anybody would say things were better after both of them than they were before.
Yeah.
Are there any other public comment? Hearing none, I think now would be up to us to decide as to what our next step might be. Do you have any suggestions?
I move that we appoint a special commission, that we create this special commission, and that we
So are you
let them
suggesting
go.
that we take directly the suggestion that was made in this document?
I think Pat's words were wise, and that is, I think you can adopt the concept of appointing a special commission, and I think the next step would be to meet with Rob and Henri, and do two things, is kind of review who's going to be on it. I think that's important, and what the charge of the committee is. I think you kind of got the outline there. one of the things one of you suggested is what you might want to say within that charge is no fewer than 3 of their meetings will be public forums, one in the lower, one in the mid, and one in the upper Cape, where they take public testimony on the county
And indeed, this would be an opportunity to apply technology in order to widen the scope of opportunity for people to participate. And I think that if we don't include that, I think we're making a serious error. Okay. So, would you care to amend your motion to?
Well, then I recommend that we do go forward and appoint this with the understanding that we will first meet with the chairs that are appointed. Not that we're going to have be able to dictate the course, but we can then just give our recommendations on how we see it rolling out as far as the parameters and public input and meeting.
Okay, so as I understand,
if it's going to be an independent special commission, I would prefer it to be an independent special commission.
So you're suggesting that we move in the direction of creating an independent commission to examine this issue?
The structure of county government.
And I'll second that.
All right. You got that down?
I think it, yeah.
Any discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? It is a vote. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Does Robin Henry know?
No.
They are wearing you're slow to
Where's the agenda? Okay. All right. You see,
We're back.
Okay. We're back. We're reconvening the meeting, the March 16th meeting of the County Commissioners.
Could you take that outside, please?
And, you know, just as a...
Sheila, could you go outside? We're starting the meeting. Thank you. Okay, the next action that we have on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of March 9th. Motion to approve.
I so move.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Okay, any additions or corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those, any opposed?
Yes, I just had one question. I mean, it was the reason why we don't have the wind regs before us on this ordinance, on this today?
Yeah, we just received them. We should have an opportunity to take them under advisement. And the other part is we're submitting a budget today over the Assembly. The Assembly's clock starts at the time that they have in hand. And I had been under the impression that they wanted to have some opportunity to evaluate both the budget and the wind regulations on a different basis. There's also the question as to whether or not, after our deliberation as to whether or not we would approve them for sending them over. That's another question that I think we have to discuss. So because of this particular discussion today, where we were addressing this, and because of the budget being sent over to the Assembly, that's the reason why we're not addressing it. That's why I did not put it on the agenda for today.
I'd just like to take up, if we voted not to approve that ordinance, doesn't the ordinance still have to go before the Assembly?
No.
Well, if you don't submit it, the charter provides that any Assembly delegate can submit an ordinance. So I could go that route.
Then we have to...
Or there's a citizen's petition, which requires a number of signatures. But so if the ordinance from the commission to you doesn't get the requisite 2 votes, there are alternatives, but because then they may recognize that that particular ordinance may not have the support of county commissioners, in which case it would need a 2/3 vote of the Assembly in order to pass.
I thought we had veto power on the other end when it came back to us if we do not send that.
Do not.
If we do not
Well, you would, but when you're presented with an ordinance that you don't support, you're under no obligation to submit it. If you don't support it, you don't submit it.
It seems to me that since we're submitting it and it cannot be amended, then the only place that we have to approve it or disapproval is at the initiation of the ordinance.
Well, that's certainly one issue, yeah. I mean, if you sign it and send it there just for the purposes of discussion, the Assembly can only vote up or down, they can't change it. So if you have changes that you wish to see in it, I would argue now's the time to do it. Send it back to the Commission with your comments and see what happens.
There's nothing that would
But
prevent...
we're kind of pre-discussing the discussion.
Okay, well, I would like to stop that right now because we're in the area of deliberation, and we have, you know, we have taken it under advisement until next week. And at that time, we need to have copies of the, you know, of the regulation so that we can evaluate it over the week.
Yeah, and that's, I
There's two
will...
of them there, by the way.
There's two of them, and actually I'm not quite clear on that particular one, but yeah, I'll pull the pieces out. The changes in here are clear. They're part of the regional policy plan, and they make some changes to the energy section of the regional
I
policy.
thought that we were going to have a discussion today, and then we were, at the end of the discussion, we would take it under advisement and vote on it the following week. Because I would like to have a discussion about it with, and I had even,
But it's
I had
not, it
talked
wasn't
to,
on the agenda.
I
That's the
know,
only
it was in
problem.
the summary of actions, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
I don't even know if it was in the
If it
summary
was
of
there,
actions.
okay.
But it was not
Because
on
I
the
would
agenda,
think,
which is the
I
only
would
concern
like to
I
see the
have.
white paper, I would like that white paper, that the commission.
And that's right here, yeah.
And
I think
also,
that's what you're
I would
talking about.
like to have Ryan here, Ryan Christenberry.
I think they
because
should be, yeah. I
And so
agree
that we
with you.
can really have a discussion.
Yeah, I assume Paul will want to attend
And
as
actually,
well.
I had suggested that Paul should have the opportunity to be before us to
Yeah.
discuss it. But if we, since this only came last night,
Yeah, I know.
I don't think that we had an opportunity to really read it, you know, and understand it before today's meeting. It was less than 24 hours. So that was another reason why I think it would be more
And I don't see
useful.
it, I don't see it on the summary, actually.
Would be
Okay.
more useful to, you know, we've received it
Well, I
now.
thought there was something in here about an
I
ordinance.
thought I saw
but
something there,
I saw
too.
something in here about an ordinance, but maybe not.
Well, I don't believe it appears in the...
No, it's not in there.
Yeah, now it isn't.
I don't see it.
All
Okay,
right,
so
so
we
we'll be
clear-
on next week.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've got it
For
posted.
2 o'clock. We have 1 o'clock. Lisa McNeil of the Cape Cod Foundation is coming over to talk about their volunteer program. And so we'll schedule for 2 o'clock next week, next Wednesday.
Okay, we'll invite Ryan and Paul
Yep.
and,
Yes, and
Probably
indeed,
Jessica.
when I had anticipated this, I had already told Paul that we were going to discuss it at length, and we should have the opportunity to present to us. And I think Ryan Christenberry would probably be with him, but certainly.
Well, she would be here. I mean, she's the one who really put it all together.
well, the only reason I
She
asked is
does
that
the most
I had a
work on it.
conversation with the speaker, and he just said if
Which speaker?
the Speaker of the Assembly, Ron Bergstrom, who was discussing Paul's request that if and when this ordinance goes before the Assembly, they have an opportunity to address the full Assembly and give them a full presentation so that everybody has an equal education. I mean, it's an important, whether it passes or not, it's important that everybody understand the ordinance and not just sort of like the bullet notes that a committee would give. And I think Ron wants to accommodate that, so timing between the budget issue and the ordinance's timeliness was just concerning him, that's all.
And
Yeah,
that's
He
why-
felt the sooner he could get it was the better. Yeah.
So, under
As
the,
soon as,
As soon as the Assembly receives it, they have a certain amount of time to act on it.
Right.
so in order to give them that full 60 days
so,
without the affect of completing their deliberations on the budget, which I think has, in this case, takes priority.
So-
They would receive it based upon the schedules that have been proposed on April 2nd, and on April 2nd, they could begin their discussion. If indeed we decide to
well, I
send it over.
think that should be coordinated with them then, that we don't want to send it if they don't have the time frame in which to deal with it. So maybe a conversation, Mark, with Ron, in terms of the Assembly schedule, because if the clock starts when they get it, then we want to make sure that they don't get it until they're capable of
Having a
fulfilling
hearing.
the time frame.
And everybody
in that
has
clock.
information, they don't have to necessarily vote on it that day, but at least everybody has the information, the public has been
Right, and
able
they
to
need the
be
presentation.
there.
No, actually, they wouldn't vote on it that day because they
No.
would start their hearing process.
Right.
And the full 60 days give them the opportunity to engage, if indeed we send it over, to engage the public in it. Now, if the Assembly, if we decide not to send it over. As Mark has said, it does not prevent a member of the assembly from, from introducing it for, for that purpose. But my concern is that the only opportunity we have to make a judgment of approval or disapproval is, in this case, at the beginning of the process.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's a very important issue, and I think that we should give it its due.
All right, so anything more on that?
No. Are we going to do the summary first?
Yes.
I have a question on number 9.
I think, let me stop you. I think you had a vote on the minutes that did not get
Oh, you voted on it.
voted.
That's right.
Did you
so
vote?
you need to call the vote on the minutes.
There was a motion, Pat made, Sheila seconded the minutes, then Sheila asked a question about the
summary.
wind turbine.
So we haven't voted. We haven't
So I
voted
don't think you
summary.
actually completed that vote.
Okay. Is there a vote?
Yes, I'll...
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any no? Okay, it is a vote. All right, now any summary of action?
On number 19, on the consultant, 9/11 and dispatch, is that the grant?
Yes.
Is that what that is that they've been working on?
That is
some
correct,
time now?
yeah.
Okay, with that, I will move the summary of actions items 1 through 28.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. There's a vote. Okay, individual reports from commissioners. Sheila?
Yes, I met yesterday with Representative Sarah Peak, and I met with her specifically about the rest area. Being the chair of tourism, the rest area is always coming into question on who is going to pay for that, and this year it looks like the full responsibility is falling, although we're still pursuing other avenues with the chamber to split that cost, but the responsibility is ending up with the county, and it is in Yarmouth, it's on state land, and that sort of thing. So that in thinking about and talking about how can we make this a more viable self-sustaining entity. The discussion came up at the EDC about acquiring that rest area from the state to have them transfer that to us, to the county, where you could actually then maybe put a business, lease it to a business. I know I have a good friend who has a business on the beaches of Orleans, and I know he gives a substantial amount of money to that town for that lease. And that lease could generate the self-sustaining. And you could also look at it as, you could have an information booth, it's the gateway to the Outer Cape, the National Seashore, there could be a lot of different nice things. You could have a farmer's market there on Saturdays.
A wind tower.
You know, whatever. It might be the better place than any, but so when I spoke to her about that, for the state to convey that land to the county is not a bad thing, and she asked that we write a letter to her asking her to pursue that, and I said that I would CC it to Senator Wolf and the Cape Cod delegation. It doesn't take a legislative act, it's really just merely a matter of paper transfer. And in talking about it even further, we might even want to think about the other two rest areas, exit Route 25 and even Sagamore. It may get in the mix, it may not. But if there was money generated, and the money was the pass-through from the county, but not to supplement the county, it was to maintain those sites, any profit that is made after all of those costs are incurred could be looked at and put into a fund for LC3s, because they really don't, they get cut out of the mix. So I was thinking about how we could assist those local chambers pursue their economic development needs, as opposed to seeing if there's a little bit of money from the the Cape Cod Chamber or a little bit of money from the EDC, and then trying to generate some of their own. There could be some sort of funding stream, but that's down the road. I think so. If we would write a letter to Senator Peak, she would get. I mean, to Representative Peak. She would have loved that.
I think that's controlled by the feds, not the state. I had a conversation with Tom Kerr the other day, and also Paul Niedzwiecki, and I said, is it state or federal? And they think it's federal highway, so
Which
we
one?
may want to check in.
State 6, Route 6.
Route 6.
That's one.
Well, I know.
I mean, Route 3.
Our permit comes from the state.
I mean, Route 6.
Okay.
Our permit,
Okay,
but
so-
apparently it's controlled by the federal highway, according to
That
them.
could be. Well,
So we should find
Could have been built
out.
by federal
All
highway.
right.
And we still will need to get the legislative support for it anyhow.
Exactly.
But we should make sure that it's not, that it isn't feds.
Well, that raises a whole bunch of questions, though, like who plows it?
I asked
Who
Tom, but he
pays the
would,
liability insurance
he would
for it?
help us with, if it belongs, if it's under the jurisdiction of the feds, the Secretary Mullen, in the state, and Tom would work with him and try to help us get that pulled away from the feds.
But didn't the chamber do this with 25 rest area? This was their whole plan for the 25 rest area.
They don't
And they ended
ever did
up
it.
closing it.
They closed it because they can't operate. It's like us. We're operating it, but we have no control over it.
But wasn't their theory, but the whole thing, they were going to try to make money on it, they were going to lease
They
property,
can't
blah, blah, blah.
because, I think it's because it's under the federal jurisdiction.
They never had it conveyed.
Yeah, they had a
You have
vending
to-
machine
But
there for
see,
a while, but. that
25
was-
wouldn't be under federal highway, because
I
that's not a
don't know.
federal.
I'm just telling you what.
Yeah.
I would be
All right, we'll
guided
find
by-
out. That's
So
what-
we need to
yeah,
find out whether
Okay,
it's
I would
federal
be
or
guided by
state.
what Tommy Kahir said, because he
We'll find
knows
out.
about this stuff.
All right, so let us.
I think it's a good
stick
idea,
with
Sheila.
this, But I think it's
Do you think it's a good
idea. And
I think it's a great idea because you could do art shows there on the rest stop. I mean, people could, if they were going to stop for some reason, if they have a sign, ahead.
Well, they have
they
the
could have
coffee
art
stops
shows. We
during
could have
during Labor Day weekends and
some
stuff
kind
like
of
that. yeah.
restaurant.
But if we leased it to a
service.
business,
Yeah.
the business would have to, cover that expense. Any money generated beyond that, and as I say, whether it be Route 25 or Sagamore, you could have highlighting what that is, and in some ways, once you get to Yarmouth, you're now entering the outer part of the Cape, so the National Seashore might want to think about putting something there, and that, we could, where would that benefit be for, local economies. So, I think the first step is to see if we can have it conveyed, and then we can look at
What the
the rest of
options
it.
are.
But I think that the local chambers need some sort of revenue, since they can't come up with $1,000 per chamber.
And we can't continue to use license plate money.
We can't, yeah.
Okay.
It needs to be
Well,
self-sustaining.
I think this is a wonderful idea, I really do. Congratulations for coming up with it. So could you sort of be the point person on this?
I will be happy to do that. I'll get in touch with Tommy Kahir, I'll talk to the chamber, and we'll get this letter out.
Start with Paul, because I think Paul knows.
Okay.
It's first.
That'd be great. And then could you report back to us in a
I will
week or
next
so?
week, and if we can have the letter written by then, we'll get
Okay,
it going.
well, would you like to frame such a letter?
I certainly will.
Okay, and then I'd be happy to, I think all three of us should sign it.
Okay.
Yeah, John, doesn't he?
There you go. I'd be happy to do that.
All right.
All right.
Sheila.
Good.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Anything else?
I'm sure there is. I'll come back to that. I didn't write a note. I feel like that there is something else that I didn't.
Oh, and are you coming on the 25th?
I'm sorry?
Are you coming on the 25th?
Yes, I am coming on the 25th.
And you know about it as well, right?
The 25th.
The 25th.
Yes, and I think that we should have Paul at that meeting, since it was he that we charged to come up with different approaches.
I don't know.
Which meeting are you talking about?
This is the one with Sarah, when I was speaking with Sarah Peak, she said that she had contacted our chair to have further discussions about NSTAR. And I said, gee, I think since, I was in the part of those negotiations with NSTAR, and I would like to have been invited.
She asked about,
So,
I got that same email.
Yeah.
About whether we could go and if it was.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure that if we, now, under those rules, we are not having a meeting of the county commissioners. We are
Right.
going to a meeting of Senator
Somebody
Wolf,
else's meeting.
right.
Cleon Turner, and Sarah Peak.
And I think,
So I wanted to be clear that we weren't in violation of open meeting laws by going, because we will not have deliberation. We are there
Well, your mere
for
presence
information.
doesn't trip a violation.
Right.
However, you guys couldn't get together and say, you know what, we don't like those wind turbine regulations, we're gonna vote against it. You can't do that.
We won't do that,
Right.
and and also, I think what she was saying is that they wanted an update on where we're going, and since, we gave that onus to the commission, that they should be there and talking about, what we've agreed upon as steps forward.
What time is
And
that?
we're gonna need their help on that, such as,
10 o'clock at Cape Air.
right,
Oh, it can't be.
and we need their support for some funding, if they can get it through DAR and that sort of thing, and that's really the crux of, that's what I would be asking them for, as a group.
Well, you might want to split, because I was going to, in my report, say we've been invited to the 100th Water Festival celebration, which will take place Friday, March 25th, 9:30 to 11:30 at Hyannis West Elementary School. Then attendees will then return to the Cape Cod Commission conference room for a luncheon, and they'll be honoring, there'll be a special recognition of the AmeriCorps members participating in their 100th Water Festival.
It's from 9:30 to 11?
9:30 to 11:30, and then at 12:30 there'll be a luncheon over at the commission.
We probably could
We
get
have
back to
the
lunch.
luncheon.
And then at 1 o'clock, we have the budget presentation from
Yes.
Senator Wolf. over
And
at the,
Senator Murray.
Right.
And Senator
Right,
Murray
at the,
over at
I
the
also have a Cape
CDC.
Cod Commission hearing that morning, so.
A busy day.
Okay, let's see. I guess, do you have anything, Pat?
I guess only to say that Falmouth voted to adopt the N-Star resolution the other
Mhm.
night. So I think that makes 14 out of 15 towns.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
Who's
So
missing?
I don't know what town is missing. I really don't.
Cape Cod Times reported that Mashpee voted last night. So
Then
15
Oh, well,
15
then
are-
that's 15 towns, then, all 15 towns.
I
then
guess
that's spring,
that's,
so.
unless anybody has anything else, do we have?
Yeah,
a-
I do.
Oh, it's your turn. Go ahead.
Here's the transmittal letter for the budget, and you have in front of you a copy of the budget and the executive summary that's going over today.
We had all had an opportunity to read this. I think it was sent to us.
And also I wanted to give you a copy of the budget hearing schedule over at the Assembly. So can you pass that along? And pass one more along. Thank you. So that's the review schedule, so you have that. You have, I sent you a copy of the presentation. It's a little bit, I changed a couple of things that people caught going through, so it's a little bit different than the original one that I had sent to you. So I'll be presenting that, or you guys can
Not this
present the
one.
first. It's a little different than
Different.
that. So it's basically the same, I made a few changes.
Okay, I would suggest that since the budget is the main product of our county administrator, that he be given the responsibility of presenting it.
Oh, yeah,
That's
well, we
fine.
did last
Well,
year.
last year you guys, I think, split up the first part, which was the commissioner's kind of philosophy piece, but whichever, whatever you guys
But
want to do.
I think the letter clearly calls that out.
Yeah, that's fine.
And if they have any questions, we'd be there to respond to them.
And then I did want to just note that the other thing that we provided you was a copy of the 2010 annual report. And this year's cover recognizes the Sheriff's Department because, of course, after 318 years of service through the county, the Sheriff's Department is now a part of the state. But also I wanted to draw your attention to the sort of inside fold, first two pages. There's a little memoriam both to Diane Thompson, which is nice, and to Dave Simpson.
Mary was already left. I wish it's been here to
Folks
see
that we
that.
lost last year, so. So, as always, Calliope from Cooperative Extension, Elaine did a terrific job with that. So. I mentioned the Water Festival thing. I also wanted to mention that I'm in the process of preparing the loan closing materials for our first installment of the most recent $10 million septic betterment loan. So we'll be borrowing $5 million against that $10 million, and I expect that to close in either April or May of this year. And then finally,
You might explain for people as to what that is, to remind them what it is.
that is, of course, the Septic Betterment Loan Program, where homeowners may take out low-interest loans through our Septic Betterment Office. We, in turn, then borrow the money from the Water Pollution Abatement Trust, which is the trust set up to loan money through septic betterments to homeowners and to towns for water and wastewater projects. And then finally, I wanted to mention that the Cove Legislative Lunch is this Friday, the 18th, and that's 12 to 2 at the Cove. So you're going to attend.
I think we're all planning to go there.
Okay. And that's all. Oh, and then I had one more thing. I do need you to vote to prepay for Bill to attend the NACO conference. I have to get a prepayment on that. So if you, and that is in July 2011.
In order to take advantage of an airfare, I've already purchased the air ticket.
Yeah, we have the funds set aside, so you have to vote to prepay.
Where are you going?
July.
He's going to NACO
to NACO
conference.
The annual meeting. I go every year.
We should go to that.
I'll move approval.
Yeah,
Thank you.
same.
All those
we
in
should.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
You didn't even ask how much.
Where?
That's all I have.
How much or where?
It's actually in Portland.
Portland.
Portland, Maine?
No, Oregon.
Oregon.
Portland, Oregon. So it's more than a couple of bucks.
Yeah, it's $600 for the plane fare.
Yeah.
Round trip.
All right, that's all I have.
Considering I brought back $750,000 in benefits for the pharmacy program, I think that wasn't a bad thing to do.
Not at all.
Not to mention the dental program that's bringing money and putting money in people's pockets back here. Not to mention the lobbying that we got for the, was it the energy efficiency block grant program?
All right,
that brought
well,
money back
that's
in.
Not to mention how long you're gonna be gone.
All 5 days.
All right.
What are we gonna do without you?
Yeah.
Well, I'll try to arrange it to be gone that long.
We'll have
Oh, by
to
the way,
plan what we're gonna do.
that's why it was so easy
There is
for us
one
to
thing
approve.
that I want to use this public forum to announce. My grandson, Drew Doherty, is an Eagle Scout. He got his Eagle last
Congratulations,
Friday.
that's awesome.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
There've
how
been
about
a
that?
lot
Yeah.
of Eagle Scouts lately
I hope so.
around the Cape.
Well, actually, he's in
I think
Duluth,
it's
Georgia,
great.
down in Georgia.
Well, also,
But,
I can
his
also
father was an Eagle Scout as well, so that's.
pat yourselves on the back, because next meeting, I recall, you're all participating in the Meals on Wheels program.
That's
That's
right,
right.
next Wednesday
And then
morning
In
at
your
Yeah.
10.
respective
Right.
locations.
He's been
So-
chasing me, so.
So we'll be meeting starting at 1 o'clock
At 1 o'clock next
Next
week.
Wednesday.
on the 23rd. And as I mentioned, Lisa McNeil will be here from Cape Cod Foundation.
So this meeting is 1, you had said 2. Next
And then
week.
the wind turbine
Okay.
discussion will take place at 2 o'clock.
Okay.
So you're meeting at 1, not at 10
Right,
Next
Correct.
week,
next week.
next week, although usually you meet in the morning on the,
on the odd day, on the odd assembly
Yeah,
day,
yeah.
right? We try to meet in the morning, right? But we
but
have,
this time you're not.
we're all gonna be
Would've,
doing Meals
except
on
for all
Wheels
water delivered
in our
food.
respective communities, so.
So that's the 23rd.
That's the 23rd. And then I believe we've discussed,
Okay.
because it's the 5th Wednesday in the month, no meeting on the 30th, if you wish.
What do you think about that?
It's fine with me. If there's nothing
Let's see how
to,
things are next
yeah,
week.
it's something like,
Yeah. We can decide next week.
Okay, yeah, you don't have to decide.
Anything else?
No,
Okay.
motion to adjourn.
Well, motion to go into
Motion to
recess.
Recess,
and,
that's right.
Reconvene at the
This week.
assembly, but we still need to sign these.
Yep.